Hello, my YouTube family. I'm Naira Vox, a 23-year-old college girl with a curious heart and a love for the unknown. Tonight, I bring you my second horror story on this channel. So, for the best experience, put on your headphones, turn off the lights, and let your imagination drift into the darkness. If you enjoy the chills and the thrill, show some love in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more haunted tales every single week. We have this old little vacation house tucked away in Colorado. My parents have always loved skiing, and honestly, that's pretty much why they bought it in the first place. The cabin's been in the family longer than I've even been alive, and you can totally tell it's aged. I mean, it's over 40 years old now, so of course it's not exactly brand new anymore. My dad spent years fixing it up bit by bit, trying to keep it standing. It's still ours, technically, but nowadays it's barely holding on. He's mentioned tearing it down and rebuilding from scratch, but I usually stay out of those talks. Anyway, this story happened around 15 years ago. I was just 8 at the time, and my older brother was 11. We were up there during this crazy blizzard. The snow was falling like it would never stop. And obviously, the two of us couldn't wait to dive into it. What made going there so magical as kids was the space. So much space. The house sits on this huge patch of land, and all around it just woods. Thick, quiet, endless woods. There's a dead-end road nearby that slopes downwards, leading to a few more large properties kind of like ours. It was perfect for playing hide and seek or snowball fights that felt like real battles. We used to come up with all kinds of games like that. That day, my brother Josh and I bundled up in our snow gear and got ready for one of our favorite snowball battle games, with our own silly rules, of course. The idea was simple. We'd each choose a base, anywhere we wanted, but we had to tell each other where. Then, we'd build a big snow wall and hide a massive snowball behind it. That snowball was like our jewel, and the goal was to sneak into the other person's base, steal it, and get back to your own without getting pelted. Josh decided to set up his fort on the neighboring property closest to ours. No one was ever really there. Seriously, like 9 times out of 10 it was empty, so we kind of adopted it as our second playground. We'd stack up small snow walls to mimic a fort, then hide the jewel snowball behind it. To get to each other's bases, we could either go through the woods or take the road that sloped up or down the hill depending on where the base was. Josh took off down the road and vanished into the snow. I was supposed to wait until he blew the whistle. That was our signal to start. So I waited and waited. At first, it didn't seem strange. He'd probably just been setting up his base. But 5 minutes passed, then 10. By then, I figured I must have missed the whistle. Maybe the wind carried the sound away, or maybe I just couldn't hear it from where I stood. I started thinking about which way to go. Should I take the woods or stick to the road? Honestly, the idea of walking through trees during a blizzard when you're just 8, it felt like something out of a nightmare. So I picked the road. The snow was deep, untouched, and hard to walk through, and the flakes kept hitting my face. But thanks to all the layers Mom made me wear, I wasn't cold at all. As I reached the driveway of the neighboring property, I tried peering through the woods. The trees were all bare because of winter, so you could see pretty far. But even then, no sign of Josh. I decided to sneak in through the trees, hoping to surprise him or maybe just grab the jewel and make a run for it. His fort was right there, but he wasn't. Not hiding. Not crouched behind a wall. I looked around carefully. Nothing. No movement. No sound except the wind. I stepped closer, thinking I'd just grab the snowball and win. But right before I could touch it, a woman's voice, suddenly called out, "Excuse me, are you looking for your brother?" I froze and turned toward the sound. The voice had come from an older woman. She was standing at the front door of the neighbor's house. I shouted back, "We're just playing a game," trying to keep my voice casual. But she replied in this weirdly calm tone, "Your brother isn't here." That didn't make sense. I knew he'd come this way. I slowly walked toward the house, and as I got closer, her face became clearer to my 8-year-old brain. She looked really old, like storybook witch old. But maybe she was just wrinkled or something. That's when I noticed something in one of the upstairs windows. Someone was staring at me. For a second, I genuinely thought it was Josh. Half of their face was hidden under a black beanie, and the rest was blocked by the bottom of the window frame. Just their eyes locked onto me. That's also when I noticed another set of footprints leading up to the front door. They looked just like Josh's boots. But the woman, she was still smiling. And not in a warm, grandma way. It felt wrong. She motioned for me to come inside. Said something like, "Come in, sweetheart. Get out of the cold." My body froze. My gut screamed no. I suddenly shouted, "Josh," as loud as I could. No answer. Her smile vanished. It was like she hadn't expected me to do that. Then I noticed something else. The trail of footprints I thought were Josh's, they doubled back. Like someone had turned around and run back into the woods. Right then, I heard heavy footsteps inside the house. They were coming from upstairs and heading down. I didn't wait. I turned and ran as fast as I could. Behind me, I heard the woman yelling, not just at me, maybe at someone else too. But I didn't stop to listen. I dared to look back at the house one last time. But the face in the window, it was gone. I didn't waste another second. I ran as fast as I could, back through the snow, retracing my steps. Then, from up the hill, I heard my dad whistling. That whistling he always did to call Josh and me in for dinner. When I reached our driveway, Dad and Josh were already there. They'd been coming to get me. Before I could even tell them what had just happened, Josh was the one talking. There were people in the neighbor's house. They told me to come inside. My heart sank. I told him the same thing happened to me. Without a second thought, Dad grabbed something, probably a weapon or tool, and went straight down to the neighbor's house. Josh and I stayed home with Mom, waiting. After a long time, Dad finally came back. He didn't look right. He said the front door was locked. No one was answering. He then told us he went to another neighbor's house. Turns out, they knew the owners of the house. They called them up. This is where the chill creeps in. The owners of that house weren't even there that weekend. No one was supposed to be in that house. At this point, the cops were called. Josh and I had to talk to one of the officers about the woman we saw. But after that, we weren't involved anymore. Dad told us the back door was unlocked when he went to check. The police investigated and found nothing. I'll never forget the look on Dad's face when he said that. After that day, everything changed. Mom and Dad took any extra valuables home with them, afraid of a break-in while we were gone. But the worst part? We never played on that property again. The memory was just too creepy. Thank God we didn't go inside that house. I've been skiing as long as I could walk. My parents used to ski competitively, and that's actually how they met, so it was always a priority for them that my siblings and I learned the sport as early as possible. Fast forward about 20 years. That's how old I am now. This story took place a few winters ago, when I was 21 and a senior in college. Everyone knows that the best skiing in the Northeast is in Vermont, so we had planned a typical trip. It was me, Jaden, Ryland, and Air. I can't even remember which mountain we were skiing that weekend since Jaden had organized the whole thing, and Ryland was the one driving. What I do remember is that it was massive. 7 ski lifts covered all the different peaks. If I had to guess, it was probably Killington. We skied for nearly 2 full days. Honestly, there were still some trails we never even touched. That's how huge the mountain was. It was the second day, and after skiing the day before, we had a pretty good understanding of the trails we enjoyed. So today, we were pushing our limits, like we always did on these trips. I'd be lying if I said we didn't have a handful of fireball shooters to keep things lively. The trip had been incredibly fun. The double blacks never got dull, and racing down each slope felt like its own little competition. We had maybe an hour left until the lifts closed. We were all exhausted, but we knew as soon as we hit the road to head home, we'd instantly miss the mountain. As we were contemplating how we'd wrap up the trip at the top of the lift, 2 girls without helmets made their way over to us. Now, this might sound odd to some, but I have to be honest. I wouldn't be doing this story justice if I didn't mention this detail. The girls, 1 brunette and 1 blonde, were absolutely gorgeous. And I don't mean that in a weird way. They were just objectively 2 of the most stunning women I had ever seen in person. It was disarming. They introduced themselves as Taylor and Devin, and we started making small talk. They said they were bored because the mountain was full of older folks, which was something I had actually noticed myself the day before. So it made sense why they'd approach a group of young guys who were probably closer to their age. Devin seemed like a seasoned skier. She kept asking Air all these technical questions about his gear. He and Ryland actually owned their own high-end skis, while Jaden and I always rented, which the girls seemed to admire. Taylor made a comment about our shooters, and we jokingly told them the alcohol unlocked our true ski potential or something equally ridiculous, which they found amusing. To our surprise, Devin pulled out an unmarked bottle and teased us for sticking to a drink as tame as Fireball. The 4 of us eagerly accepted the challenge and took a swig from their bottle. I could tell Ryland was starting to get a little too into it. He tends to drink more than he can handle, so it wasn't too surprising. I made a mental note not to drink too much, though. Something about this whole situation just felt off. I still couldn't wrap my head around why these 2 girls would be interested in hanging out with a bunch of kids like us. Especially since we were all wearing helmets, making our faces barely visible. But things were going smoothly, and Amir was being his usual overly flirtatious self. Taylor seemed to be into it, so I wasn't complaining. I figured we'd just spend the rest of our time on the slopes with them, which I didn't mind too much. Heck, maybe they knew of something fun we could do after the slopes closed. Just then, Devin asked if we'd ski down a trail called Devil's Forest. The name didn't ring any bells. Our friend Chase would have known it for sure. He had the trail map practically memorized, but he wasn't with us. We told them we hadn't skied there yet, and they explained it was a glade trail. Glade trails are a bit obscure, rarely open, and they run through trees, so you're basically skiing in the forest. Honestly, we loved glades more than any other kind of trail, so this Devil's Forest trail instantly caught our interest. We told them we were game, and they motioned for us to follow them. We reached a choke point on our skis, and they told us to take them off because we need to walk uphill for a short while. I could tell we were in a pretty desolate part of the mountain. The snow was perfectly untouched, and there wasn't a soul around. The idea of an adventure was kind of exciting, though, so I didn't think much of it. Drunk and curious, we unclipped our skis and followed the girls up the mountain. Amir and Ryland sprinted ahead, probably eager to flirt some more with the girls, while Jaden and I lagged behind to give them some space. As we walked, I noticed Jaden seemed a bit off, so I asked him what was bothering him. I like to think of us as the more rational ones in the group. Amir was unpredictable and impulsive, and Ryland would probably follow a girl off a cliff if she let him. Jaden said it felt strange that this so-called trail wasn't accessible from a ski lift. I agreed. I'd never had to walk uphill just to get to a trail before. We both decided to keep a sharp eye on things. After all, what could two girls do to a group of 4 grown guys? They led us into the forest, and the terrain finally started to level out. Jaden and I caught up with the others, and it was clear Amir and Ryland had already made good progress. Ryland had his arm around Devin, who was smiling and laughing. They pointed ahead to where we'd been traveling, but now, the slope had begun to tilt downward. I sighed, thinking how much I wished Chase were with us. He'd know exactly where we were and where this trail led. Jaden still seemed doubtful and asked the girls if they were sure this was a real trail. They reassured us, saying it would lead us right back to the lifts. Before I could speak up, Devin pulled out the bottle again and insisted that we all take some more. Amir and Ryland eagerly swigged from it, but when it came to Jaden, he said he'd had enough. As soon as Jaden spoke, I swear I saw Devin's smile twist into a furious scowl for just a split second. But when I blinked, it was back to that perfect smile again. I must have been the only one to notice, though, because everyone else seemed completely normal. She flashed Jaden a seductive smile and batted her eyelashes, practically begging him. Reluctantly, he grabbed the bottle just to get her off his back. By the time it reached me, I brought the bottle to my mouth but didn't drink. Something about this whole encounter was sending warning signals straight to my brain. I handed the bottle back to Devin, who quickly tucked it away. I noticed something odd. Neither of the girls had taken a sip this whole time. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. 30 minutes until the lifts closed. I tried to think of an excuse to get out of skiing this trail, saying we wouldn't have enough time to get back to the parking lot, but the girls insisted we had plenty of time. They also mentioned that the lifts were connected at the bottom. Without any warning, they told us we were wasting too much time and took off toward the slope, ordering us to follow if we could keep up. Amir and Ryland immediately followed, eager to see where this led, while Jaden and I hesitated, not thrilled with the idea but feeling like we had no other choice but to follow. I let Jaden take the lead. After all, this was still a tricky slope, and skiing through trees in a forest is no easy feat, but when we made it to the bottom, a sense of relief washed over me. The 4 of them were there, laughing and flirting as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Jaden and I caught up with them, but something was wrong. There was no lift in sight, and the forest seemed to stretch endlessly around us on all sides. I demanded to know where the lift was, my voice firm. They told me to stop worrying, assuring me it was nearby and that they'd take us there in just a few minutes. I tried to calm myself, thinking I had been overreacting all this time. But as I rubbed my eyes, I heard a loud thump in the snow. I opened my eyes and saw Ryland, lying motionless on his back, completely passed out. The girls laughed, calling him a lightweight, but something felt seriously off. Before I could even process it, Amir collapsed next, slumping over just as fast. Panic surged through me as I rushed over to them, quickly unstrapping my skis. I silently thanked my luck that they were still breathing, but the horror of the situation hit me like a punch to the gut. Jaden, confused and scared, took a step toward the girls, demanding to know what was going on. They looked genuinely surprised, claiming they had no idea. Jaden stepped forward again, and just like that, he crumpled to the snow as well. I stood frozen, staring in disbelief, struggling to make sense of it all. My head spun, and a terrifying thought crossed my mind. I was next. The girls stopped pretending at this point, watching me with cold, calculating eyes, as though they were waiting for me to follow suit. I felt the dizziness take hold, and despite every urge to stay upright, I sank into the snow, too weak to fight it. I tried demanding answers, shouting at them to tell me what they had done to us, but they didn't even flinch. I wanted to get up and run, but my body refused to obey. I couldn't move, couldn't stand. It was like the world was slipping away from me. I refused to lose consciousness. I kept my eyes wide open, forcing myself to stay aware of everything. Eventually, I heard Taylor speak to Devin, something about how I must not have drunk enough. There was a raw anger in her voice now. Devin muttered a curse before snapping at Taylor that they needed to go. I stayed frozen, still unable to move, but my gaze never left them as they began unstrapping Ryland's and Amir's skis. They moved methodically, walking away into the forest with the skis in tow. My mind raced. I couldn't just let them get away with this. My body still felt numb, but I couldn't let it stop me. They were walking off with my friend's skis, and they couldn't be moving that fast, carrying double the weight through deep snow. Minutes crawled by, but I could feel some sensation returning to my limbs. I stumbled, forcing myself to follow their tracks in the snow, but they had gotten shockingly far, considering the weight they were hauling. Then I saw them, ahead of me, just barely in sight. I focused on keeping them in view. As long as I could track their movements, I might be able to figure out what they were up to. The forest soon opened up into a clearing, revealing a narrow road. It clicked. We had to be on the opposite side of the mountain, far from the lifts and everything familiar. And then I saw it, the van. My heart sank. I froze at the edge of the trees, hidden in the shadows. The side of the van slid open, and 4 large men stepped out. The girls seemed completely unfazed, casually motioning for the men to get back in the van. One of the men turned, his gaze locking onto me. I froze, my blood running cold. He pointed directly at me. That's when the realization hit me, like a bolt of lightning. They knew I was there. I was in too deep, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd left my friends, unconscious and vulnerable in the woods. I felt like an idiot. The guys in the van seemed to be debating whether to chase me or just leave. I didn't want to stick around to find out, so I turned and started making my way back the way I came, my legs still shaky and my head spinning. I knew I could follow the tracks I'd left in the snow, and sure enough, I found them. They were still out cold. I decided to wake up Jaden first, figuring he'd had the least to drink. After rubbing handfuls of snow on his face, he finally stirred and was awake enough to talk. I quickly filled him in on what had happened. We were both still in shock, trying to make sense of everything. We tried waking up Ryland and Amir, but they didn't budge. With no other choice, we just had to hope those guys hadn't decided to come after us, but surprisingly, they never showed. I may not be telling this story if they had. We waited for nearly an hour before our friends finally woke up. We immediately told them everything. They had a million questions of their own. Who were those girls? Who were the guys in the van? What were they going to do to us? It was a chilling thought. What could have happened if I hadn't acted fast enough and pretended to drink? The best case scenario was that we would have woken up robbed. But even that was terrifying. It was hard to imagine anyone going to those extremes just to rob a bunch of broke college kids. Who even keeps valuables on them when skiing? Sure, Amir and Ryland's expensive skis might have been worth stealing, but it still seemed like overkill. How would they even know that we had them instead of rented gear? Nothing about this made sense. Finding the car was a nightmare. Reporting the incident to the police was even worse. The people at the resort promised they'd help us identify the girls and the guys from the van, but we had to hit the road and couldn't stick around to follow up. The police took it more seriously, and they told us we'd be updated if anything new came up. But at that point, I didn't know if I wanted to hear any more about it. I think it even made local news, but it's been years now, and they never found everything. To this day, we have no clue what kind of drug they gave us. Nothing online described anything that worked that quickly, especially in such a small amount. Our best guess was that it was some kind of mixed substance, which makes sense, because after we woke up, everyone felt kind of woozy. Those girls and whoever was behind the whole thing were some seriously twisted people. I can only hope it was just an elaborate robbery and nothing more. Now, this is going to sound a little strange, but hear me out. Every winter, my friends Kyle, Ricky, and I have this small tradition of walking out onto a frozen lake a few towns over. It's not a big deal or anything, we just do it for fun. There's something about being out there on the ice, surrounded by the stillness, that feels almost otherworldly. It's one of those simple pleasures we've always enjoyed. Call us weird, but we just can't get enough of the peace and quiet. If you've ever been out in nature by yourself with nothing but the soft sound of snowflakes falling, you know what I mean. It's like you've got this small slice of nature all to yourself. Plus, the photos always turn out amazing, which is a huge bonus for a couple of edgy guys like us. This happened this past winter, actually. It's April as I'm writing this, so about 4 months ago. I know what you're probably thinking, but don't worry, none of us fell through the ice. That's not where the story is headed. It was snowing pretty heavily that night, which was actually one of the reasons we decided to go. The temperature had been consistently below freezing for a couple of weeks, so we felt pretty confident that the lake was fully frozen over. Personally, I'd take winter over summer any day of the week, and I'm sure my friends would agree. There are about 1 million reasons why, but one of the biggest ones is the snowfall itself. First of all, it's just beautiful. But what I love most about it is how it keeps the world from ever feeling completely dark, even after sunset. The light reflecting off the snow kind of blends day into night, leaving you with this eerie, surreal vibe that nothing else quite compares to. The moon was almost full that night, which made that feeling even more intense. Kyle was behind the wheel that night. He had a pickup that handled snow really well, so we just let him drive. Normally, Ricky was the one who drove us around, but tonight we played it safe. The lake's surrounded by a thin strip of trees, or maybe cluster of scattered trees would be a better way to put it. Either way, they were enough to keep cars from driving straight to the water's edge. We parked in a lot nearby, got out, and braced ourselves for the freezing cold. The 3 of us bundled up and started walking toward the lake. At that time, I didn't smoke and I still don't, but Ricky and Kyle both did, so they lit up a couple of cigarettes as we walked. I think it was after midnight, but honestly, I can't be sure. All I really remember is that there wasn't a single soul around, no animals, no people, nothing. The only movement we saw was the 3 of us walking. We reached the lake, and as we expected, it was completely frozen over. We were all laughing about something dumb when Kyle picked up a small boulder and tossed it onto the ice to test its strength. It didn't even crack, so we took that as our cue to move toward the middle of the lake. Of course, we didn't go too far. That would have been reckless. But we did venture a decent distance from the shore, maybe about 100 feet out, when something caught our eye on the far side of the lake, near where the trees met the ice. Something large and dark was moving. We stopped talking, our laughter dying in our throats as we froze, watching it. The figure was big, hunched over, and moving slowly toward the lake. At first, we thought it might be a bear. Ricky was the first to whisper, "Is that a bear?" But I couldn't answer. My heart was already racing. If it was a bear, the last thing we wanted to do was draw its attention. So we stood perfectly still, barely daring to breathe. But as it got closer, something didn't feel right. The way it moved, it wasn't like any bear I'd ever seen. It was too upright, almost human-like. And there was something dragging behind it. Nothing about it made sense. It was one of the most bizarre things I'd ever seen. And then, just like that, it straightened up fully. That's when it hit us all at once. It wasn't a bear. It was a person. A person in some kind of bear costume. Kyle whispered, "What the hell?" in a low voice, and honestly, I was thinking the exact same thing. I know it might not sound terrifying in a typical way, but if you had been there with us, you'd have felt the same dread. I tried to speak, but no words came. I don't know if I was more confused or scared, but something in me screamed to stay quiet. The figure kept moving toward the ice, dragging something behind it. At first, the details were hard to make out through the snow, but as it got closer, I saw that the figure was holding a rope tied to whatever it was dragging. After a few moments, the shape became clearer. It was a small black bag, almost like a garbage bag, but smaller. The sight of it made the whole thing even more chilling. We stood frozen, unsure of what to do. My mind screamed at me to turn around and run, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I felt completely paralyzed. Ricky and Kyle didn't look like they were in any rush to leave either. They hadn't moved an inch. Honestly, even if I hadn't been so terrified, I think I would have stayed put. I had to know what this person was doing. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any weirder, the man started unzipping the bear's suit and stepped out of it. Seeing him as a person didn't make things any better. He wasn't particularly large or physically imposing, but there was something deeply unsettling about him. We watched as he crouched down, seemingly to pick up a rock. From where we stood, it was hard to tell, but that's when the noise started. He was holding something that looked like a rock, and he began pounding it against the ice again and again. It might have been a placebo effect, but I swear I could feel the vibration in the ice, even from the distance. It felt like he was trying to break through, likely to dispose of whatever was in that bag. Ricky tapped my shoulder, and I turned to see him and Kyle already backing away towards solid ground. Without saying a word, I followed their lead. We moved as quietly as we could, but every step felt like a thunderclap in the eerie silence. Even though I knew there was no way the guy could hear the snow crunching under our feet, the sound seemed so loud. We had barely made it a few yards when we heard a voice yell out from behind us. "Hey!" I didn't hesitate. I didn't look back. I just started running, praying he didn't have a gun. The cold air bit at my lungs, and I could feel myself getting winded after only a minute of running. I don't know if he followed us. I don't think he did. But in that moment, panic had fully taken over. We reached the edge of the lake, and I was gasping for breath. After a quick, frantic pause, we made our way back to the car, not saying a word to each other. Kyle drove off immediately, the tires screeching as we left that chilling scene behind. None of us spoke about what had happened. We couldn't make sense of it. Kyle shrugged it off, saying it was probably just someone dumping trash, but none of us believed that for a second. I told Kyle that was ridiculous. Who in their right mind would dress up in a bear suit in the middle of winter just to illegally dump trash? It made no sense. Ricky disagreed, saying it was definitely someone dumping a body. But I argued that the bag was way too small for that. We spent the whole ride home debating, trying to come up with an explanation, but we never reached a solid conclusion. We didn't get any answers. The reason I'm thinking about it now is that my mom was watching TV the other day, and an old missing persons report popped up on the screen. It was about a child who had gone missing from around our area. The timeline of his disappearance was eerily close to when we had seen that figure on the lake. Now, I'm not jumping to conclusions. I know it's a long shot, and it could just be a coincidence. But I can't help but wonder if those two events are somehow connected. By the time you're hearing this, we've probably reported what we saw to the police.